It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Ashley Micciche. Hi, Ashley. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Douglas.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. You are the CEO of True North Retirement Advisors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I was reading through this. Are you more catering towards businesses, or do you take people personals, or how does your company work?
We work with both. Our specialty and what makes us pretty unique is that we specialize in working with business owners. And my background is in 401k consulting. And so through that, I met and started working with a lot of small business owners. And I found that when it comes to planning for their own retirement, they have this big elephant in the room, which is what the heck do I do with my business, and how do I make sure that I can incorporate that into my retirement plan? So it kind of led me down this path of focusing on working with business owners and not only helping them with their retirement, but helping them with the exit of their business as well.
So if I own a business and I'm in my 50s and I think, okay, maybe in 15 years I want to get out of this, what exactly would you do?
Well, it depends on a lot of different factors, but basically we look at the business, what makes it unique, what path do you want to pursue as your exit path? You know, do you want to, is it sellable to an outside third party, maybe a competitor? Do you want to do an internal transition where you sell it to an employee or a group of employees or family members? So we look at, you know, what's the timeline, what value is in the business, and what is their preferred exit path, and then we design, create, and implement an exit plan that helps them meet their goals on their terms and their timeline and what they're trying to accomplish. Okay.
Does it make any difference if it's a big business or small business in terms of the process?
Somewhat. Big businesses, you know, they tend to, there's a smaller market of buyers because if you have a business that's worth $50 million, you know, you can't just sell that to your employees. You know, a lot of times it's the size of the transaction, the size of the business would limit the number of potential buyers for that. So for small businesses, they tend to have more options. But, you know, as you grow in revenue, as you grow in size, you're also able to exponentially grow the value of the business as well. So there's trade-offs with being big or being small. And the planning is a little bit different. But again, it goes back to what is the business owner trying to accomplish? Like I just talked to a attorney last week who wants to sell. He has a very niche law practice that he wants to sell. And, you know, in his situation, he's not going to grow to this massive, 10x his revenue in terms of sale price. But, you know, he doesn't need to sell his business. He wants to sell his business. And so the planning for that, because he doesn't need to sell his business, is a little bit different. Whereas most business owners, because they've put so much money reinvested back in their business, it really does make up a substantial part of their net worth. And so I would say the vast majority of business owners that I talk to, they have to sell their business. They have to get something for it when they exit, and that needs to be a part of their retirement plan because otherwise they just don't have enough to transition into retirement.
Okay. I want to go back to the lawyer that you brought up. How does one sell a law practice? Because isn't the product the person? I mean, isn't his law practice him?
Yeah, so that is a big problem, and not just with law practices, but with a lot of service businesses or like consulting practices, or it's a huge problem for anybody who's like a solopreneur as well, because the business does revolve around you. Maybe it's your personality, your experience, you know, your certain expertise. So his exit plan is likely going to be grooming somebody from the inside, training them to take over, transitioning the business to them gradually over time, selling them the law practice over time. And rather than selling, now he's so niche and he's in a very specialized area that, unlike I think a lot of other law practices, there's real value because of his specialization. So it's possible that a larger law practice may want to acquire him, but it just goes back to what are his values and what is most important to him. And I think at this point for him, we're leaning towards an internal succession rather than selling his book of clients, basically.
I had somebody approach me on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. I think they were just fishing generally, but he said that he would be interested in talking to me about selling my show. And I just had to kind of laugh because how could I possibly sell my show? I mean, I understand selling the shows that have already been produced. That I get, okay? But to actually sell the show, if somebody replaces me, it's no longer the Douglas Coleman Show, right?
Right. Yeah, there's a little problem with the name there. Yeah.
So I don't get it at all.
Plus
I mean,
it's you and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So, my father and I own our practice together, True North Retirement Advisors, and we had some heated discussions when we founded the company in terms of what we would name it. And because I knew that to make our company sellable in the future, not that we're necessarily planning to go down that path, but keeping our options open to that, our practice needed to be sort of its own entity versus based on like the personality or the owner. So you see a lot of small businesses, they're named after the owner or the founder.
Right.
And sometimes that's not an issue at all, but the name, and this is important for businesses when they're just starting, if you sort of begin with the end in mind, that's that, Stephen Covey concept is, okay, if I want to potentially sell this down the road, or at least give myself the option to, I'm not necessarily going to want to make this about me and name it after me. I may want to it may influence how I would do something as simple but big as naming my business. So yeah, there's just a lot of elements to selling a small business, especially one that revolves around the owner. And not just that, but a lot of business owners, they tend to be weak in areas of documenting processes, procedures, and that can hinder value and the ability to sell and market your business as well, because it's just everything's just living up in your head. What do you have to transfer to that future buyer as well? So there's plenty of things that business owners can be and should be doing to prepare their business for exit. And so those are the kinds of things that we focus on when we actually get into the details of building those exit plans for clients.
How do you determine how much a business is worth, assuming it's not a public company?
Yes. So that used to be very difficult to do. You'd have to, hire somebody, pay them thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars to value your business. It's based on a lot of different factors, but the two primary drivers of value of any business in any industry are going to be what your revenue is and what your pre-tax income is. And then you have to be able to kind of compare that to other businesses. So, if you have a radio show or a dental practice, or you have a small manufacturing firm, whatever those are, you're going to want to compare your revenue metrics and your pre-tax income with other like kind of businesses, and then that will help determine what is an appropriate value. And we actually use a software tool to generate valuations for our clients, because it is the first step in that exit path, is figuring out what your business is worth.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
I don't know how much you know about radio shows, but I thought I would just throw this one out and see. In the old days, before the internet and before everybody was doing podcasts, radio shows were owned by a network like NBC or CBS or ABC, something like that. And then they had local affiliates in each town and cities across the country. But they owned all that. So if you had a show on there, it would be under the umbrella of the major station, the network, right? These days, you've got people like me who are doing standalone shows, all on their own. So I guess my question is, where would I even start to try to get a value for my show? Because if you had like NBC, they would take the value of the whole network, right?
Yeah, and usually there's a little term, it's called the NAICS code. It's a specific drilled down industry that you belong to. So you would just do a little bit of research and figure, I'm not sure what that would be for a radio show or a podcast, but somewhere in that media category, you can drill down and find out for other like kind businesses what your revenue is, what your pre-tax income is, a few other metrics if you want to get a tighter valuation, and then you can get pretty close, and it doesn't take a lot of time or effort to do that.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with Joe Rogan. Do you know who he is?
Oh yeah, I
Okay.
love Joe Rogan. I don't like his podcasts are too long for me, so I don't. But I just I watch a lot of his clips from his shows on YouTube.
Okay. Well, you probably saw the story that a few months ago he sold his podcast to Spotify for $100 million.
Yes, and that's a great example because it's like, well, a lot of that obviously is the value is just him, and I wouldn't be able to apply that valuation to another podcast because it's such a unique situation.
Well, that's always been my question is how in the world did they come up with that figure for him? Is it strictly based on views? Is it based on, because he didn't do a subscription thing that I remember. So they would have had to taken from just like YouTube views or something like that. It baffles me how they came up with that figure.
Yeah, and I don't know because I'm not at the table with Spotify as they're having these discussions, but I would guess that a big part of it is what having him exclusively on their platform will do to their future growth and their future subscriptions and the people that will come in from him being on Spotify. So, it's pretty speculative in his situation. But I think they're willing to pay such a high price tag because they're banking on the future growth of it. And it's funny because you see this a lot in a lot of businesses, especially large ones where they might issue an IPO, the company will go public, and you just see these insane valuations. You saw them quite a bit, and a lot more like in the late 90s and early 2000s when all these tech companies were going public, and you would see ones with like, they'd have revenue, but they were losing money hand over fist every single year. And then the company would be worth like $100 million or $1 billion or something. And, but the reason why is because there was this foreseen future growth potential there that investors and people who are willing to buy the company or buy somebody like Joe Rogan's podcast, they're willing to pay for that because of the future growth prospects. Now, as we saw when the tech bubble burst, a lot of times those speculative valuation, crossing your fingers, I'm going to buy this in the hopes of future growth, it does not play out how one would hope.
Yeah, I guess it just gets a little bit more vague when the product is actually the person, rather than something tangible like a car or, a ballpoint pen. Those you can kind of value. You could value the business based on inventory, even with those type of businesses. Yeah. Yeah,
it's certain businesses. Yes, there will be things like inventory that are going to influence the valuation more than other metrics. And that's why it's so important that you compare to like-kind businesses as well, because other businesses in that industry are going to be valued based on those same metrics. But for the vast majority of businesses, revenue, pre-tax income, knowing what industry you belong to, and comparing those two data points will get you very close to your actual valuation. Most of the time I see it's within like 10 to 20% of the actual value.
I got one more example of how to value something, because this was something I started to get interested in a while ago and then am no longer interested because it just got too complicated. How does one value a bar or restaurant? That always seemed to be very difficult as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't have any clients currently that are bar restaurant owners, so I haven't built an exit plan for anyone in that industry. So okay. I don't know off the top of my head what drivers of value are going to be unique.
Location, I suppose.
That. I would imagine, yes, location. Yeah, there's certainly some intangibles there, right? A big one for a lot of businesses, and I would imagine this is true for bars or restaurants, is whether or not do you own the space that you operate out of, or do you rent? Because if you own, sometimes, that's a big part of valuation as well.
Well, then it's right. It's part of the valuation, but it's also kind of a separate entity because the land value, the building value, you could sell that without necessarily selling the business, correct?
Yes, and actually I have a client right now. His business is worth, right now it's probably worth about $3 or $4 million, but the real estate, so he owns the real estate, the facility where they operate out of, and that's worth more than the business. So part of the decision is, well, do we sell this as a package deal, or do we separate out the business from the real estate? And there's a lot of moving parts with that and decisions to be made, but he wants to divest himself from both. And so, we're going to need to figure out how to do that as we get closer to making some decisions on that.
Okay. We're kind of running to the end of our time. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up or you wanted to talk about?
Yeah. I would just encourage any business owner out there. The vast majority of business owners do not know what their business is worth. And if you were to ask most business owners what their business is worth and compare that to the actual value, it's usually wildly off. So I would encourage any business owner to take the time, and it doesn't take much time, to find out what their business is worth. And to make it easier, we provide free access to the valuation tool that we use with our clients. Anybody who wants to use it can use it. And also a checklist of some key data points that you would want to collect about your business before entering that information into the valuation tool. And so anybody who wants to find out what their business is worth, if you go to truenorthra.com/value my business, you can download the free checklist and get access to the valuation tool so you can figure out what your business is worth and then decide, do I need to grow this business, or am I ready to start implementing an exit plan so that I can retire from this business at some point in the near future.
Well, Ashley, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was very informative, and I think I learned a thing or two. Hopefully our listeners will as well. And best of luck.
Thank you.